Good morning, Dan. How you doing today?
Come on, Eric. Well, it's May 21st and it feels like it's March 21st. It's kind of chilly and rainy up here in New York. I should say down here in New York. I used to have a girlfriend who used to say that. She says, "I'm coming up to New York." She lived in New Hampshire. So anyway, yeah, so it's kind of chilly. That's why I got the sweatshirt on. So yeah, so all good. So nice show the other day. So we started doing the fire engineering's first two battalion chief again. We've resurrected that. So if anyone wants to hear us on some other venues, first two battalion chief on fire engineering's what's it called? Radio engine fire radio engineering, something like that. Fire engineering radio, whatever. So anyway, so today let's start from the beginning. We're going to talk about size up. We're going to talk about Culver's wealth, and the C in Culver's wealth is
Particular.
construction. And I think we'll just start from the type one. Um, Dunn calls it fire resistant construction. We in the New York City, we call them class ones. We call them fireproofs. But what do you call them in Boston? I guess kind of the same. You have the same
Yeah, type one. Type one.
type one.
Um, yeah, we'll stick with basically C today.
See, and
Um,
most just type ones for now.
yeah, construction part one. This way we don't overload you with too much information.
Yeah. So
Um,
you'd ask yourself this question. So why is it important? Do I have to know about this size up and Culver's wealth and construction? Well, first of all, most importantly is that how is the fire going to behave, right? So when you're talking about a type one building, a fireproof or fire resistant, you're talking about basically a fire that is confined to just the area of the fire, right? So if it's an apartment, it's in that apartment. In a residential, if it's a commercial building, then hopefully, if the sprinklers don't knock it down, it's just confined to that one part of the building. But we know that as far as fire extension, we're not going to get any extension to anywhere else, the floor above, maybe some auto exposure, but generally it's a one apartment fire. And I don't know, Eric, so like your experience, that's been my experience.
yeah, I would say I was at a fire once. I wasn't a chief where there was some auto exposure that caught the curtains the floor above. And the members caught it before it took off. But from the fire floor, it was blowing out pretty good and lapping up.
Mhm.
So I would say, even though it's type one and you're assuming it'll be just a apartment, office, or whatever, I would still stress to get above the fire and check just for that reason.
Yeah. So I actually have Dunn's book out here, and I know this anyway, but I'll just read it. So I'm gonna read what Vinnie Dunn says. He says the major fire problem in a fire-resistant building is the central air conditioning. Fire-resistant buildings used for commercial purposes, such as offices and hotels, have one large central HVAC system, which may serve the entire structure with cool air in the summer and heat in the winter. So that's the first thing I would try to figure out is if the building has central HVAC, right? I'll give you like two contrasts. You have like something like the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building, or that's commercial, or a residential project building, 20-story. They don't have central air. So basically, they have maybe window air conditioners in the residential, or in something like the Empire State Building. They open the windows actually, or they
Hmm.
might have wall units as well, or they might have something on the floor, but there's nothing that's going to go floor to floor. Looking back at the MGM Grand Fire back in, I want to say it was '86, I think. I don't remember the year. It was in
Yeah.
Vegas, where they had
Yes.
like
Yes.
a boatload. I
They
just
were,
can't remember the amount of
what were they? They
fatalities.
were renovating or doing something on the main floor, and disgruntled employees, I believe,
Right.
lit a fire.
Yeah, in the ballroom type area.
Yeah, and ooh, I don't remember many of the facts, but a lot of people died over it.
But what happened was many of the people died on the upper floors too because the smoke got into
Hmm.
the HVAC system, you know. And I had heard too that people had died because the smoke had come in through the windows as well, which I can't believe that would happen. So that's the one thing that I would try to figure out first when the box comes in. You read the ticket. If it's first of all, if it's A, if it's residential, and B, if or is it commercial? Because if it's commercial, then we have to think about addressing the HVAC system, right?
Yeah, you made me think of something, and I'm losing my train of thought here today, but um about the voids in those particular buildings. Um, oh, I know what I wanted to say. So I used to live in an old commercial, fully renovated into units, blah blah blah. But it had its bizarre heating system. So each unit in the wall had a heating and cooling system, but it was an open shaft. So because I lived on the fourth floor, if the people below me turned on their heat, I didn't have to because it traveled up the shaft
Right.
and into
Yeah,
my
yeah.
unit. So I
Right.
always had a low heating bill, and that was the main reason.
Hmm.
And before I forgot, I had that popped up when you were talking about Dunn's statement about the central ear, and that system wasn't technically central air, but it's how it actually worked. Saved me money.
Hmm.
But yeah, I find in I wonder if you're noticing this in on these new platform frame that are sprinkled. Now that you say that, I'm amazed at the ones that have air conditioning in the window
Hmm.
for a modern building. Um, so I think there's a big difference between commercial and residential, those type of buildings, even with new construction. Um, they'll go the cheapest route and not supply at least air conditioning. Um, I'm a little just bizarre, something that popped up. But yeah, one of the things I like to say talk about is like you say, once you get the ticket or we get the box and you're going out, now you start your mental size up that you're getting there. Um, what what are your some of your thoughts, say, when you're still several blocks away? Uh, tell some new chiefs, what's your mindset as you're coming down the street? Are you listening to the radio, uh, a song? Like, what is your mental game
Yes.
plan and as you respond? If you can show that to the new people.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and it's really important to use all your senses, right? So you're listening, and you also have the window
Mhm.
open because, and your eyes too, like because you know mostly the taller buildings, you're you might see it from a few blocks away, and you know what's difficult with fires in these high rises is that you know we get so many calls on them, you know, and we're trying to discern all this information. And I think the biggest thing that we have to discern is it going to be a fire that's confined to an apartment, or if it's a fire outside the apartment, like let's say in the hallway, the stairwell, the elevator, or the compactor, right? Because what I'm sizing up is, you know, how is that smoke traveling? Right? Where is that smoke going? What kind of,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you know, is it a hot day? Is it a cold day? Is the smoke going to be being drawn out of the building, or is it just going to come back down? You know, so I talked about it once before. I'm not sure if it was here or whatever, but you know, I had a fire in the summer. It was like really, really hot day. It was probably in the 90s, you know, and I think I told this on the fire engineering the other day. And the fire was in the compactor chute,
Mhm.
and you know, I pull up on scene and it was just 100. Everyone from the building was out in the street. And a guy comes over to me and he was so happy. He's like, Chief, he goes, you know, I evacuated the building. I said, yeah, thank you. Now you just put everybody in a bad spot because they left the safety of their apartment and they went into a very IDLH type of scenario, you know? So with the fire, when it's not in the apartment, it's outside the building, my opinion, I think that's more dangerous. Only because we can't confine it, right? That's the
Correct.
same with the high rise too, because
Correct.
high rises have big open areas, even even commercial like storage places, like loft buildings. I mean, they have these large undivided spaces, which if they're not sprinkled, they it's a large area. I mean, of potential fire. But if I find out it's in the apartment, what I'm listening for is, if I'm hearing smoke, 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 and then I hear fire, then
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
where am I hearing? What floor is that fire on? I'm thinking about um, what floor the fire is on, and do I have serviceable elevators? How many stairways? Sometimes in my mind, I'm trying to. You could look, it's a little trick. You could look at the building. If it's more wide than, like, if it's more rectangular,
Hmm.
look for the bulkheads. You could see them. You could see them for a few blocks away. If the bulkheads are on either side, you have those long hallways, right?
Right.
If you have what we call core construction, right, where everything is in the middle, so you have what they call like scissor stairs, right? You have the elevator and the stairs all like in that core. That's going to be a whole different, let's say, attack, right? So that's one thing that you want to size up with the building is where the staircases are in relation to the fire. I want to know where the elevators are. I want to make sure that the elevators are being recalled, right? Um, and the other thing I'm looking for is, does the building have a standpipe or a sprinkler or both?
Both. Yeah. I think
Um,
of I had a fire one day, 7 stories, uh, standpipes, same thing, long hallways on sides, more rectangular than wide, deep, I should say. And picking the right staircase, um, the fire kind of worked out. It was contained to the apartment, but I will say most of the residents, this building had the inter apartment PA system, communication system.
mhm. Yeah.
So the deputy had somebody down in the lobby saying, "Hey, stay in your apartment, stay in your apartment, stay in your apartments unless we come and get you." But you're still gonna have some people that just get that doesn't matter, they're leaving. And a lot of times I don't think they realize they're taking a bigger chance by coming out of their apartment. What if they pick the stairway being used for fire attack? They're right into the heat and heavy smoke pushing up. Um, that's why, again, it's always imperative with uh, you can't know them all, but and even minor runs, I think you should spend time even after you clear the run with looking for FDCs, uh, elevators. Does it have maintenance elevators? There's one right down the street from my firehouse that looks like a 5 story, but if you go in the back,
Mm.
it's about 9 stories. It's on a hill. It goes much deeper. So at first, some people say, "Yeah, why is this considered high-rise residential?" And I'm like, "Well, you got to go around the corner and you'll see why."
Yeah, 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 I get it.
But it's
Yeah.
one of those older senior houses that have been uh, constantly rehab. It's sprinkler now. They just put the sprinklers in. They didn't attempt to hide them or anything. And also on the I guess I'll call them porches. They originally had porches, but now they have to have cages. They still have the porches, but they got like fencing
Mm.
over what used to be the open space, kind of,
Mhm.
to prevent whatever. But those buildings, I believe, I think sometimes when we say like type one, we think of, fully sprinkled office building and not necessarily like a,
more like like a residential. Yeah. So, Eric, one thing I found out the hard way, right? So many years ago when I was still a firefighter, we had a fire in a building. Now you got to figure where my district was at one point was all tenements. Then they tore down the tenements when they burned them out, and then they built up these type ones or whatever. But there was one particular building that was interspliced. I wish I could show a picture of it. I guess at some point we got to start showing pictures. I show this in my PowerPoints when I do it. And from the outside, it looks like a type one, right? But there's two things that are different. It looks just like it. I mean, it was built by the New York City Housing Authority. You go into the lobby, it's got all concrete. It's got enclosed stairways, so compacted, the whole thing. So you get lulled into this idea that it's a type one, right? So anyway, we had a fire one day. It was a fire in like an electrical closet on the third floor, and we thought nothing of it. Like we stretched. I was I working in the truck? I'm not forgetting. They stretched, knocked it down, no problem, just one little thing. And then there's a report from the roof, and the roof firefighter was like, 1-7 roof to battalion. He says, we got a heavy smoke condition on the top floor. And then now we got smoke condition in a cockloft. And what happened was the fire had traveled up that void, got into the cockloft, and took the whole top of the building off because it had what I call cockloft vents, right? And that's a big tell sign, and had fire escapes, which I should have known better that it wasn't a fireproof building or a type one. So I learned from that. Anyway, a few years later, it was April, I was in FDIC, I was doing a class, and there was a building that I had identical because they built all these buildings all throughout the Bronx. And anyway, I drilled on my guys. We drilled on this building all the time. We were third due though. We weren't first due. Anyway, we drilled on it. It had a standpipe, but it was dry standpipe anyway. And my friend Jimmy in the truck, he told me that he didn't know that it was a type 3. He thought it was a type 1. He's on the top floor, and all of a sudden he's wondering why he's getting burnt. So it was like a perfect storm, right? The engine decided not to use the standpipe, and they stretched 20 lengths. It took them forever to get to the fire. My friend Jimmy is crawling around thinking he's in a fireproof building. Meanwhile, the fire is raging above his head. It blew down on him. He got burnt, and it wound up going to a third alarm. So, had everyone known that it was a type 1, I mean a type 3, they would have acted accordingly. They're thinking like they're safe. It's like a type 1 building. So that's why I think it's really important to really figure out like what the buildings are in your district, because sometimes like I'm looking at your brick wall in the back there, right? And I could just tell by the courses. I see the soldiers and the sailors, and you have like every other maybe few rows you have them turned around. So I know that's a real brick wall, even though it's, I know it's a backdrop. But sometimes you'll drive by a building and you'll see brick and you'll think, okay, well, I have either a brick building or a type 3 or whatever, a mixed construction, not realizing that it's just brick face, and it's really full of voids, and it's just really kind of glued on to like, onto the block. So that's why I think it's so important. First step is just construction, to know what you're dealing with.
Yep. Yeah, I think and as you've noticed, I'm just looking at the table, how we've gone from like basically 5 types of construction to subcategories and numerous other classifications. And these platform ones where, the first floor is structural steel and the rest is lightweight wood, which are getting bigger and bigger. I've heard people say, it's protected because it's got sprinklers and a standpipe system. But I'm like, well, unless the voids are sprinkled, I still don't really consider that a fully protected building. Maybe partially protected. And they seem to regardless of the facade, they're all the same pretty much with the long hallways, the stairways on either end, the cheap way. Whereas I've seen a few others where there's also a central staircase, but those are generally older. I feel like the newer ones probably give me more anxiety than the old ones.
Mm-hmm.
Not to like downplay the older style type ones, but these new ones, because that false sense of security of, oh, it's new and it's sprinkled. And as you know, like they allow plastic pipes now.
Mm-hmm.
If fire flashes over, gets hot enough, it'll just melt the pipe, and now there goes your sprinklers.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas maybe in the older building, it's the cast iron piping or whatever they have. I Yeah, I would say we have a lot of similar. They're generally a few floors smaller than New York,
Mm.
and to me, they're constantly getting renovated. Not only the inherent voids when they were built, but these void spaces they create now, trying to ride more, run more electrical, fiber optics, internet, uh, certain things like trash chutes, dumbwaiter chutes now have been converted to who knows what.
Mm-hmm.
I had a building in my district, which I'm glad is gone now, but in the old maintenance elevator, the owner had built little studio apartments in the actual shaft.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So instead of having the elevator, he took it out, put floor in, and turned them into these like closet studios that he was actually renting to people. And he thought that was okay, you know?
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I think, and we'll get into it another time, but
Right.
um, some of these buildings, when they've been renovated, you never know what's in there. Um, but like I said, we'll get into that. But I would say for myself, mostly, um, they should be bread and butter fires
Mm-hmm.
with adequate water. Um, it's you got to worry about the higher you go, the wind. New York, Boston, they're both basically coastal cities, so the wind shifts every
Right.
10 minutes. You got to be very, very conscious of that. And that's kind of like some of the main things I think about. And even still, if it's big enough, I might go in the lobby, but generally, I still like to be a little away from the building just to
Right.
kind of look and see, oh, white smoke, we got it. Or, hey, they got water and it's getting worse. Um,
Mm.
but now, for us, once we hit 70 feet or 7 stories, we're considered a high rise. And we don't, we get much more resources than chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
So there was one fire that I was sent as a evac chief. We'll send a chief just to be in charge of evacuation. So, anyways, this was a senior home, maybe 8 stories. One room fire on the seventh floor, and the deputy sent me up to the eighth floor and to, give him a report of conditions. Unfortunately, when we came out, when we went up the secondary stairs to get to the eighth floor, it was clear as day. Um, Whereas the fire floor was pretty banked down with smoke. So I was pretty happy that. And the hardest part was telling all these seniors, just stay in your apartment, shut your door. You're much better off,
Yeah.
because people are panicking. They're hearing the fire alarm system. They hear noise. They know there's a fire. They can smell it. So I don't remember if that building had the PA system, but I would say for my assignment at that fire, and I reported down to command that there's no need to evacuate the floor above,
Right.
but I'm going to need resources to help convince these people to stay where they're at.
Yeah, that's a
And
good point. You brought up a great point, and that ties into construction perfectly. Is that, in your mind, you got to think about what kind of evacuation. Are you gonna do shelter in place? Or are you
Yeah.
gonna try to evacuate people? But what happens, what we have no control over, is that when people leave their apartment, the door shuts behind them. They get kind of locked out. They forget their keys or whatever in a
Oh,
panic.
yeah, yeah.
Now they're in the hallway, and we've had fatalities like this. And they're dragging, other people have dragged people out and down the attack stair or whatever in the smoke, and then we've had fatalities. We've had
Yeah.
fatalities in the stairways in Chicago. I think the Cook County building, they had 12 fatalities in the stairways because they left the safety of of their building. So
Apartments.
you have to decide pretty much, depending on where the fire is, if it's in the apartment or outside the apartment, whatever, what kind of evacuation you're going to do. Another thing that we have to consider, and it was a high rise, but it wasn't a type one, but it's kind of the same. We could kind of apply it.
Mhm.
Duplex apartments, they're becoming more and more prevalent. We have duplex apartments in residentials, and in commercials, we have what we call access stairs. So a company like my wife's company, New York Life, they have 3 floors of an office building. They'll have an interior stair that's connected, open interior stair for three stories inside a fireproof building. So there's no way to confine that, right? Because it's an open interior stair. So you have to very early figure out if it's got access stairs or if it's or residential, if it's duplexes. Like for example, we had a fire one time, and my buddy was working. I was third due engine, and the fire was, let's say, on the fourth floor, and on the B side we had heavy fire out the windows on the B side, but on the D side, heavy smoke pouring out the fifth floor, like on the opposite side. So the chief, in his mind, thought that he had 2 floors of fire. What really was, we found out that it was just the smoke was venting out the fifth floor, right? So this is something that we have to determine early when we're, hopefully be on a SIDS. Or I know that in Boston, you have like there's a program, isn't there? Like where it's a program, someone did like floor plans or something for the.
Yeah. When the MCTs were coming in, we had a chief who was really, really into it. And it's a really good program, but extremely involved. Um, like to get a lot of information while you're responding, um, is almost uh, it's almost impossible to get so much information without pre-firing it. You know what I mean? Um, so one of the things I was going to say to go off of what you said is that particular old factory I lived in, I actually had a duplex apartment.
Mhm.
So I technically lived on the fourth and fifth floor. Um, and I used to sit there, and besides looking at the mortise and tenon columns, and it had sprinklers, but I always said, wow, if you're upstairs sleeping and something catches on fire downstairs, we're pretty much screwed unless I could break the skylight and we climb out onto the roof.
Mhm.
And I think that's extremely prevalent. And even um, just before I transferred to where I'm at now, I did a building inspection, brownstone, South End. And I walked in, and I forget, you go upstairs, first floor, wide open to the roof. They had renovated it, and basically the front 20 feet was just a giant, almost like cathedral, like all the way to the roof. That's how
Mhm.
they wanted it with like balconies overlooking. It was converted back into a single family, but I found it interesting. I said, wow, that'll imagine if there's smoke showing and you throw a ground ladder to the third floor window and you think you're gonna go in, you
Yeah,
better check the floor.
yeah. Well, we do in New York, actually. We have those types of buildings, and they'll put a sign outside the window and it'll just say shaft on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, I know we got about 8 minutes left. I wanted to talk about something else about commercial buildings, and this is maybe only in New York. I don't know if other cities do it, but I think it's a great idea. on the bigger high rises, and I don't have firsthand knowledge on this, because I
Yeah,
only
yeah.
spent about 2 years in the first division, and I've used them a few times. But it's called the BICS, Building Information Card. And on the front of it, it's got all the features of the building. And on the back, it's got a schematic of the elevators, like, because
Hmm.
in New York, on the high rises, some elevators don't service every floor. Like you might have one elevator
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
from
yeah.
1 to 17, then you have another one that goes from 17 to 32, and 32 to 48, whatever. And then, some are local, some are expresses. And now we're even starting to get that with our standpipes now. They'll have express standpipes that don't service every floor. So the engineer has to make sure that he hooks into the right FDC, because you might see maybe
Yeah.
three sets of them on the front of the building. You have like three different sets of Siamese. So all this now is factoring into your size up about with construction. About now you have to worry about your water, your HVAC, your elevators, and then that BICS, like what I like about it, gives diagrams like so if you get, hey, I got a fire on the Bravo Charlie side, you're looking at it, you see the offices and the layouts of where the where the offices are in relation to the
Yeah, correct.
elevators and stuff like that. So, the thing is, those fires are very far and few between. The bread and butter for us is the fires in the projects. We call them the
Yeah,
projects, the
yeah.
fireproof multiple dwellings, the NYCHA buildings, and they're pretty much the same. They're
Correct.
all laid
Yeah.
out the same. I could tell you, like, without looking at them, you know, the hallway you come out of the elevator, the A apartment starts to the left, A, B, C, D. So actually, they've done a very good thing in New York. They'll put the letters on the windows, under the windows on the first floor. So it'll say A,
Yeah.
B, C,
Okay.
right? So if you get a call for smoke on the D apartment, okay, well, it's on the Bravo side or whatever. It's very helpful in doing a size up, because you could pull up, there could be smoke coming out of like numerous windows. It could come out of the bulkhead, it could
Yeah.
come out of the elevator shaft, wherever. So these are all things that you have to size up in a commercial building. But the beauty about the NYCHA buildings, is probably thousands of them in New York, is that they're pretty much laid out the same. You come into the kitchen, then
Yeah.
there's a living room, the bedrooms are in the back, and so on and so forth. And they all, like, if there's 20 floors, 20 stories, the A apartments are all the same, the B apartments are all the same. They just line up perfectly. So this is, again, another great tool for your size up.
Yeah, I tell you real quickly on that subject. Um, this one housing development in my district during, I think they called it the Hope under Clinton, where they were tearing down and renovating projects. Well, they tore down a lot of buildings, but they kept some. And what they did was they added basically like a peaked roof over the 3 or 4 story buildings to make them look more townhousey like.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
I tell people the old roof is still there. That old tar is still there.
that's right.
The old rubber roof is still there.
Mm.
So if something gets going up there, not only is that there, it's going to get nasty. It's lightweight construction.
Mm.
It's just lightweight truss. But yeah, I think we could call this like part one of this.
Yeah. I don't think we have to touch on every,
No,
like, type twos, we get hit very quickly because they're very far and
yeah,
few between. You're talking about Walmarts and big
yeah,
box stores, but type three, we're going to spend a lot of time on.
yeah. And
I
for
would
any,
encourage everyone, if
yeah,
you could see it, the collapse of burning buildings. I know it's tough with the,
yeah.
maybe over here. I know it's actually backwards, but Vinny Dunn's collapse of burning buildings, and Brannigan's book. I think two good books on building construction, and
Yeah.
it's a good read. I'm probably one of the few nerds that really enjoyed.
I wish I could find mine. You wouldn't believe how annotated my Dunn book was. I
Yeah, I
had
have.
color
This is
coding,
my
highlighted, written
Yeah,
notes.
this is my third edition now. My other one is just falling apart,
Yeah,
and I don't know what I did with the other one, but this one is my latest one. Um, it's a wealth of knowledge about building construction, because, again, and we'll just recap. We got about 3 minutes left.
yeah,
The importance of construction is going to know how the fire is going to behave. So according to Dunn, the biggest problem is smoke. The biggest problem is, it doesn't happen a lot, but the spalling of the floors. The concrete will spall and it'll, kind of, I don't know, it'll buckle and whatnot, but you need a really, really hot fire for that one. Let's see if I could actually find it. The type ones, 5 standard. Okay, then he talks about, so he addresses things in 2 ways. He talks about the fire problem and then the collapse problem. And like I said, he talks about the collapse with the fire resistant. It's just the spalling, the moisture in the concrete spalls, and then you get like localized collapse. So
Yeah, we
if you
should
want
have
to
kept
read just
using.
the NFPA standard 220, type 1 fire resistant construction, exterior bearing walls are rated for 4 hours or 3 hours. Structural framework 4 hours or 3 hours, and then floor construction 3 hours or 2 hours. So that's the NFPA standard 220 on the let's say the burn, the walls and the floors and the framework.
Yeah, and I just want to say to everyone out there, um, thanks for your time. Subscribe, share, comment where you can, and send us questions through the YouTube account. And in some episodes, we'll have short ones addressing people's questions. And anything else, Dan?
No, that's it. We got about a minute left.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so like I said, let's take it piece by piece, size up. I'm seeing more and more of these buildings, type ones, in everywhere. Like even in my town, I live in
yeah,
a small town, and we're getting type ones. Little office buildings. They're built with, they're all sprinkled, but still, we're getting these multiple dwellings and office buildings in smaller towns now. So it's not just a big city problem anymore.
yeah.
It's becoming a national problem or worldwide problem for that matter.
All right. Well, till next week.
Till next week, we'll see you
Take care.
on the YouTube. All
Yeah, yeah.
right. Thanks.
Oh, yeah,
Kill it?
yeah, it stopped recording. Like,
Okay.
oh, maybe it
It still
didn't.
says recording. Okay, now it's
Oh,